Welcome back. We're here with Mary Schlesinger, our interactive metronome therapist, who is based in our Reston, Virginia clinic. But now with the pandemic, what we've realized is we have to do so many things virtual. And this is such an interesting, important therapy to optimize one of the most under recognized parts of the brain, the cerebellum.
Yeah, before we get too far along, we would love for you to post something that you learned today. I'm actually learning a ton. If I'm being overly quiet, more quiet than I usually am, it's because this is pretty new to me, and I'm finding it pretty fascinating. So if you are learning something, or you know someone maybe who's been through this or who could use it, post it. Also send us your questions and your comments. And if you would be so kind as to leave us a review at brainwarriorswaypodcast.com, we would be ever so grateful. And Mary, I'm curious, how on earth did you get interested in this?
Well, like I was saying earlier, it just all started with a man I knew of who was doing it for Parkinson's. And my father had Parkinson's. And so I thought, well, okay, let's see what this is about. And so then, as I would say, my friend with her children, and it kind of went from there. It just kind of, started. I have a background, I would say certification in teaching. I didn't go that direction once I got out of college, and I did do teaching later. But I think there's always been a teacher in me. And for me, this is the best kind of teaching there is, because it's one-on-one. And you really get to know the individual, because they're, entrusting very personal parts of their life with you. And you get to see them get to the point where they have the improvements that they need. And basically the confidence goes through the roof. I mean, some people, when they come by to begin, their head is hanging low and they feel bad about themselves, and they feel like this is going to be another therapy that they're going to fail at. But they leave so confident. And so it's just, every person it's like reading a different book. They each have a different story, but they all have a nice ending. And it's just so fun to see that transition and to just see the trajectory of their life change.
Well, and one of the things this reminds me of, so we talked about table tennis a little bit. It's that repetitive movement that is working the cerebellum. And during the pandemic, I taught my 10-year-old niece how to play ping pong. And initially she hated it and she was no good at it. But the training, I could see every day she was better than the day before. And then developing competence. It is just really fun to see her blossom. But I'm also thinking about karate.
Yeah.
Because one of the reasons, so karate is bad if you get hit in the head, right? Brain is soft, skull is hard, don't get a head injury. But the complex motor movements that you do repetitively, the katas that you learn, is so good for your cerebellum.
It's also soothing. I was thinking about this as you were going. It's one of the reasons I asked that question about how you got involved in this. I was wondering if you had done any research on this, because I was thinking about it as you go. I do this weird tapping thing in my car if I'm stressed out. I know people are going to go, okay, she's really weird. But I don't know if I'm the only person who does this. But on my steering wheel, I'll do this bilateral sort of like tapping thing. And it soothes me if I'm really anxious, I'm late for something, I've got a lot on my mind. There's all sort of tap to music, and it settles me down, just like karate settles me down. And I'm wondering if it has that same sort of effect.
Yes, it definitely does. In fact, I tell people, it just ties in with what you're saying. I say, if you're stressed and you go out taking a walk, and I just kind of found this out myself by accident. Usually I take a walk and I kind of, de-stress, but I found out that I wasn't. And so I started making the right hand. It's basically a tap where you're making a circle on your leg as you're tapping. And I just started doing that, and it helped me relax. But I do know that when I work with individuals, I didn't really go over all of the things that typically change, but usually besides focus and concentration and impulsivity, I tend to see initiative and organization. But I see also reduction in anxiety. And I see motor changes too. So this is used for neurological as well. So I see reduction in tics and things like that. But I've had people tell me that they fall asleep faster or they stay asleep. Things just settle down in their mind and in their body. So I think that's really important. I've worked with people who, pick at their fingers so much that they have to bandage them because they're bleeding. And there's just, it's not just the adults, the kids. There's a lot of kids that are just carrying a tremendous amount of stress, and it just de-stresses them. And just like it does with the impulsivity, I have kids, mostly kids, sometimes adults, who come in and they are really up on the ceiling. They're really there. And by the time they leave different. Now, it's not hardwired yet, but just by doing it for an hour, they're much more settled, and that stays there.
Yeah, that made me think what you brought up. I was just thinking the same thing because there are lots of studies. I believe there's 127 studies on martial arts and how it is good for certain issues. I hate calling them disorders, but issues like autism, ADD, behavioral issues, because of that settling. It's the katas that are so good for them. It's because of the rhythmic movement. But there are a lot of people who can't do martial arts. And so that's what's making me think about this. It's the rhythmic motion of it. It's that. So I'm wondering, that's got to have that, or maybe it has that same effect.
And if somebody's listening and they want to do this therapy with you or talk to you about that, how do they do that? They just call the call center,
Sure.
at clinics. There is information on interactive metronome on our website, but tell us another story.
Okay.
Perhaps a student you've worked with.
Okay. And yes, they would just call they would call Amen Clinic. And like you said, there is a good piece on the website, the Amen Clinic website, that actually shows a video clip of it being done and what have you. But I would definitely call them back. The starting point is the assessment, and that's where they come in, get some basic scores, and gives them a good introduction to metronome. They have the headphones on and the sensor, and they can kind of get an idea what it feels like. And I even let the other family members try it out too. But in terms of another story, this one was really important to me. This was a girl, she was a rising 6th grader, and she had ADHD, and she was making good grades, but it was sheer determination, and she was on medication. She was on adult levels of Concerta. She was taking Intuitive. She barely got through the school day, and then by the time she got home, she had to take more to get through the homework. And then every night she ended up taking melatonin so then she could fall asleep and start it all over again. And she got to the point where it was a failure to thrive situation. The Concerta had, taken away her appetite. So her stomach would be growling, but she just was not eating her lunch. And so the mom was really, really getting worried. And the doctor said, look, there's nothing else I can give her. I mean, she's already on adult levels, and she was a very wispy young girl. And so it was summertime. And the mother said, I'm just taking her off of everything. It's summer. It doesn't matter if she's bouncy. So she took her off, and she called me. She didn't know anything about metronome. She'd just come across it and then did a little research and called me. So I started working with her, and it was over a 49-day period in the summer, but we really only worked, I believe it was maybe 17 sessions. So 17 1-hour sessions. You don't do it for more than an hour at a time, because even if you're not tired, the brain's been given a workout. So it needs to rest overnight. You can do it the next day. So it's time for school to start. And also she was carrying a lot of stress about transitioning into middle school and kind of stuck in that loop. So we went through the sessions, and she started, and it was obviously at a new school. And the mom wasn't getting any calls from the teachers. And so she called the school and she said, did you all lose my phone number? Because, it's a new school. But she was so used to getting the calls. And because she went back with no medication. So they said, no, we just didn't have any reason to call you. Now, this girl was on an individualized education plan where they give you a little extra time or make some accommodations. And so what happened was when the mom talked to the teachers, they said, no, she's a little bit chatty, but it's just whatever you would expect from a 6th grade girl. And so what was interesting was they had their first IEP meeting, and the teachers all came, and they said, you know what, we don't really know why she's on an IEP. She doesn't need to be on an IEP. So it was just amazing to go from adult levels of medications to starting a new school year in an unfamiliar school, and having what would be extra layer of stress, and not having your medication, and yet still being able to maintain your grades and actually be released from the IEP.
That's amazing.
So
Yeah.
I know it was so exciting. It was really, really great. And the mother, what I do is I have people give me examples of why they came, really specific. This tends to happen, and this is the scenario, and this is how often. And then I have them make goals, because you forget where your starting point was when you start to improve, and it's in their own handwriting. So I love going back to those and saying, remember how you had this problem? And they're like, oh yeah, I kind of forgot about that. That hasn't been bothering me lately. And so this mother, on her own, she was documenting everything. And she wrote me, I think it was probably a 3-page, maybe 4-page, single spaced.
Wow. I want you to send that to me. We're running out of time.
Okay.
But, that's what keeps you excited about what you do. When you change someone's cerebellum, you change their life. So stay with us. When we come back, we're going to talk about more stories about how the interactive metronome might help you. Post one thing you learned on any of your social media sites. We're so excited. The Brain Warriors Way podcast listed as one of the all-time best podcasts on Apple Podcasts. And if you leave us a comment, question, or review at brainwarriorswaypodcast.com, we'll enter you into a raffle to win either the Brain Warriors Way cookbook or the end of mental illness. Stay with us.
If you're enjoying the Brain Warriors Way podcast, please don't forget to subscribe so you'll always know when there's a new episode. And while you're at it, feel free to give us a review or 5-star rating, as that helps others find the podcast.
If you're considering coming to Amen Clinics or trying some of the brain healthy supplements from BrainMD, you can use the code podcast10 to get a 10% discount on a full evaluation at amenclinics.com, or a 10% discount on all supplements at brainmdhealth.com. For more information, give us a call at 855-978-1363.